5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. 5.
Respect Abid sir.
जी सामने काम
Ji, we can start the program now.
जी would you like who's chairing it? Are you chairing it, Sada sir?
अगर आप कर लें तो it will be.
Okay, sorry, I'll get the program 1 second. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. My respected Sada Sahib, respected brothers Khodam al-Ahmadiyya, Canada, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. It's a pleasure to commence this session, and we will be starting with the recitation of the Holy Quran, which will be offered by Fatin Riaz Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر أن الله يسبح له من في السماوات والأرض والطير صافات كل قد علم صلاته وتسبيحه والله عليم بما يفعلون. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض وإلى الله المصير. ألم تر أن الله يزجي سحابا ثم يؤلف بينه ثم يجعله ركاما فترى الودق يخرج من خلاله وينزل من السماء من جبال فيها من برد فيصيب به من يشاء ويصرفه عن من يشاء يكاد سنا برقه يذهب بالأبصار.
Jazakallah Fatin Saab. The English translation will be offered by Tahir Mia Saab.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace, blessings, and everlasting mercy of Allah be upon you all. The following is the English rendering of the verses just recited, taken from chapter 24 of the Holy Quran, Surah An-Nur, verses 42 to 45. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. Have you not seen that it is Allah who praises all who are in the heavens and the earth, and so do the birds with their wings outspread? Each one knows his own mode of prayer and praise, and Allah knows well what they do. And to Allah belongs the kingdom of the heavens and the earth, and to Allah shall be the return. Have you not seen that Allah drives the clouds, then joins them together, then piles them up, so that you see rain issue forth from the midst thereof? And He sends down from the sky clouds like mountains, wherein is hail. And He smites therewith whom He pleases, and turns it away from whom He pleases. The flash of its lightning may well nigh take away the sight. Allah alternates the night and the day. Therein surely is a lesson for those who have eyes. Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah. The Urdu translation will be delivered by Tahir Ahmed Sahib. Is Tahir Sahib there?
Are you listening? Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. कुरान करीम की इन आयात का उर्दू तर्जुमा पेश खिदमत है। अल्लाह के नाम के साथ जो बड़ा मेहरबान और बार बार रहम करने वाला है। क्या तूने नहीं देखा कि अल्लाह ही है जिसकी तस्बीह करता है जो आसमान और जमीन में है, और पर फैलाए हुए परिंदे भी। उनमें से हर एक अपनी इबादत और तस्बीह का तरीका जान चुका है, और अल्लाह उसका खूब इल्म रखने वाला है जो वो करते हैं। और अल्लाह ही के लिए आसमानों और ज़मीन की बादशाही है, और अल्लाह ही की तरफ सबको लौट कर जाना है। क्या तूने नहीं देखा कि अल्लाह बादल को चलाता है, फिर उसे इकट्ठा कर लेता है, फिर उसे तह बतह बना देता है, फिर तू देखता है कि उसके बीच से बारिश निकलने लगती है, और वो बुलंदियों से यानी उन पहाड़ों से जो उनमें वाक़या हैं औले उतारता है, और फिर जिस पर चाहता है इस पर उन्हें बरसाता है, और जिससे चाहे उनका रुख फेर देता है। बईद नहीं कि उसकी बिजली की चमक उनकी बिनाइयां उचक ले जाए। अल्लाह रात और दिन को अदलता बदलता रहता है। यकीनन इसमें अहले बसीरत के लिए इबरत का समान है।
Jazakallah. And the French translation will be offered by Sajid Ahmed Muslim Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Je vais présenter la traduction française des versets qui viennent tout juste d'être récités. Chapitre 24, sourate Al-Nur, versets 42 à 45. Je cherche refuge auprès d'Allah contre Satan le maudit. Au nom d'Allah, le gracieux, le miséricordieux. N'as-tu pas vu que c'est Allah que tous ceux qui sont aux cieux et sur la terre glorifient, et qu'ainsi font les oiseaux avec les ailes déployées? Chacun connaît le mode de son adoration et sa glorification. Et Allah sait très bien ce qu'il fait. Et c'est à Allah qu'appartient le royaume des cieux et de la terre, et vers Allah sera la destination. N'as-tu pas vu qu'Allah pousse doucement les nuages puis les réunit, puis les entasse, de sorte que tu vois de la pluie sortir de leur milieu. Et il fait descendre du ciel des nuages comme des montagnes, dans lesquelles se trouve de la grêle, et il en frappe qui il veut, et il l'écarte de qui il veut. Peu s'en faut que l'éclat de l'éclair n'enlève la vue. Allah fait alterner la nuit et le jour. Il se trouve assurément cela une leçon pour ceux qui ont des yeux. Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah. I would now request respected Sadr Majlis Qadam al-Ahmadiyya Zubair Afzal Saab to lead us in pledge.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I request all Khuddam, wherever they're joining us today in the closing session, if they can kindly stand up and repeat. Ashhadu
Ashhadu
la ilaha
La ilaha
illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Ashhadu la ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. I bear witness none worthy of worship except Allah. He is one and has no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant and his messenger. I solemnly pledge that I shall always be ready to sacrifice my life, wealth, time, and honor for the sake of my faith, country, and nation. Likewise, I shall be ready to offer any sacrifice for guarding the institution of Khilafat-e-Ahmadiyya. Moreover, I shall deem it essential to abide by any maruf decision made by Khalifat al-Masih, inshallah.
Jazakallah Sahib. I would now ask Farooq Tahir Sahib to give recite Nazm.
السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. منظوم کلام حضرت اقدس مسیح موعود علیہ الصلوۃ والسلام. حمد و ثنا اسی کو جو ذات جاویدانی ہم سے نہیں ہے اس کا کوئی نہ کوئی ثانی باقی وہی ہمیشہ غیر اس کے سب ہیں فانی غیروں سے دل لگانا، جھوٹی ہے سب کہانی، سب غیر ہیں وہی ہے، ایک دل کا یار جانی، دل میں میرے یہی ہے، سبحان من یرانی، ہے پاک پاک قدرت، عظمت ہے اس کی عظمت، لرزاں ہے اہل قربت، کروبیوں پہ ہیبت، ہے عام اس کی رحمت، کیوں کر ہو شکر نعمت، ہم سب ہیں اس کی صنعت، اس سے کرو محبت، غیروں سے کرنا الفت، کب چاہے اس کی غیرت، یہ روز کر مبارک، سبحان من یرانی، سبحان من یرانی، جو کچھ ہمیں ہے راحت، سب اس کی جود و منت، اس سے ہے دل کو بیعت، دل میں ہے اس کی عظمت، بہتر ہے اس کی طاعت، طاعت میں ہے سعادت، یہ روز کر مبارک سبحان من یرانی سبحان من یرانی تیرا یہ سب کرم ہے تو رحمت عتم ہے کیوں کر ہو حمد تیری کب طاقت کلم ہے تیرا ہوں میں ہمیشہ جب تک کہ دم میں دم ہے تیرا ہوں میں ہمیشہ جب تک کہ دم میں دم ہے یہ روز کر مبارک سبحان من یرانی سبحان من یرانی جزاک اللہ
Jazakallah, thank you. The English translation of this nazam will be delivered by Shakil Mirza Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum. I shall now present the English translation of the couplets just recited, written by the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam. Praise and glory to the one who's eternal. There is no one equal unto him, nor one like him. Only he lasts forever. All others are mortal. It is baseless to attach hearts with strangers. All are strangers. Only he is the real soulmate. This is in my heart. Holy is he who watches over me. Pure is his holy might. Supreme is his grandeur. His near ones are tremulous. His angels are in dread. His grace is universal. How to thank for this blessing? We are all his creation. Him should you love. His honor does not brook that we love the strangers. Pray, bless this day. Holy is he who watches over me. All our comforts are through his grace and offering. The heart is loyal to him. His grandeur is in the heart. Pray this better to submit to him. There is piety in submission. Pray, bless this day. Holy is he who watches over me. He is the support of all. He is the mercy manifest. He is the one we cherish. He is the one, our beloved. We cannot live without him. Without him, all else is false. Pray, bless this day. Holy is he who watches over me. So,
Jazakallah. And I would request Rizwan Khan Sahib to deliver the French translation, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Je vais maintenant présenter la traduction française du poème récité écrit par le Messie promis à l'Islam. Toutes les louanges sont à lui, dont l'être est éternel. Personne n'est égal à lui, personne ne lui ressemble. Il existe de tout temps, le reste est éphémère. Aimer d'autre que lui n'est que vaine et pure fantaisie. Lui seul est le désir de mon cœur, autre que lui je ne connais. Mon cœur s'exclame, Saint est celui qui veille sur moi. Saint est son pouvoir, magnifique est sa splendeur. Ceux qui sont près de lui tremblent devant lui. Les chérubins éprouvent une crainte révérentielle devant lui. Sa miséricorde est universelle. Comment le remercier pour ses faveurs? Nous sommes tous ses créatures, il faut donc l'aimer. Comment sa jalousie permettra-t-elle que l'on s'amourache d'autre que lui? Béni est ce jour, saint est celui qui veille sur moi. Tous nos conforts sont ses dons et sa grâce. Notre cœur, nous lui avons vendu, car notre cœur connaît sa vraie grandeur. L'obéissance à Dieu est la meilleure des choses, car le vrai bonheur y réside. Béni est ce jour, saint est celui qui veille sur moi. Tout ceci n'est que ta grâce, tu es toute miséricorde. Comment donc te louer? La plume en détient-elle le pouvoir? Je serai bientôt à toi, aussi longtemps que je suis. Béni est ce jour, saint est celui qui veille sur moi. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. And I think there's going to be a video presentation now of the activities of Majlis Khodam al-Ahmadiyya Canada.
On December 3rd, 2019, Majlis Khodam al-Ahmadiyya Canada announced the launch of its Shelter Bus campaign as an innovative solution to provide temporary shelter, food, and water to the most vulnerable members of the community.
Yeah, so it's playing
is a
on
modified
YouTube right
transport bus.
All right, okay.
That has
Once
the
we go back
capacity
live,
to provide
we will
20 beds for overnight stay,
update you as well, so
and
we can
features
start
a functional
again.
kitchen, toilet, and storage arrangements.
Vikas, is there a possibility
The
if we
shelter
can
bus
play that here as well?
operated
Or?
from a period of 3 months, daily, from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., and was able to provide over 800 individuals with meals, clothes, and shelter. Media coverage reached over 4 million people through television, radio, and print media. The initiative earned wide recognition from leaders within the city of Toronto and the province of Ontario. Furthermore, through various other initiatives, Majlis Khodam al-Ahmadiyya Canada was able to distribute over 4,000 food packs and collected over 1,000 units of blood through its food and blood drive initiatives throughout the country. This past January, post-secondary students from across Canada traveled together to the UK to take part in the historic students' trip, the first of its kind, where they had the immense blessing of participating in a students' class with their beloved Imam, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, may Allah be his helper. Students had the opportunity to directly ask Hazur Anwar questions and received valuable advice regarding matters of faith, careers, and spirituality. During this trip, students also had the opportunity of touring the new mosque and offices built in Islamabad, as well as a tour of the Jamaat archives where they saw rare photos of various moments in Jamaat history. Students also spent time in various sessions with elders of the Jamaat and engaged in faith-enhancing discussions. Following the guidance of Hazur Anwar, the Neighborhood Helper Program was launched on March 20th, 2020 in response to the global COVID-19 pandemic. It had the goal of providing 24/7 care and support for Canadians across the country. Highlights of this program included the distribution of 675,000 pounds of food, 20,000 masks, 40,000 gloves, and responding to over 5,000 phone calls for support from Canadians, including many senior citizens. Many Canadians endorsed their appreciation and gratitude to the Neighborhood Helper program. Over 11 national news outlets and 14 articles were published highlighting this noble initiative throughout the country. The Neighborhood Helper campaign was widely commented on and commended by national members of parliaments and mayors of Canadian cities. On Saturday, August 15, 2020, 214 Merikabir Fall gathered in Tahir Hall in Peace Village to attend the historic first ever virtual class with beloved Hazur, may Allah be his helper. Atfal had the opportunity to ask questions directly to our beloved Imam and benefited from the wise words of Hazur Anwar. The class consisted of many memorable moments which were entirely full of the worth of Hazur's love. The Atfal were extremely motivated and grateful to have this opportunity, despite the travel restrictions imposed by the global COVID-19 pandemic. While all the guidance and advice given by Hazur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, are immeasurable in value, one principle of importance emphasized by Hazur was to always offer all of your 5 daily prayers and always tell the truth. May Allah continue to bless our beloved Imam and grant him long-lasting health and happiness. Ameen. This past year, the various Ahmadiyya Muslim Student Associations, or AMSAs, affiliated with universities across Canada, held major Tabligh conferences as a part of a national-wide campaign titled God, Fact or Fiction. These multi-faith conferences featured presentations and discussion surrounding the topic of the existence of God. Some of the conferences had attendances in the excess of over 200 guests and were positively received by the public. These multi-faith events were held in over 6 different universities across Canada, including Calgary, Hamilton, and several other universities in the Greater Toronto area. As always, the primary focus of Majlis Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya Canada is the reformation of Khuddam. Even with the coronavirus, that focus did not change this year. In light of a growing need that was felt for educating parents, the Department of Tarbiyat organized a unique series of educational sessions with a wide range of topics catered towards parents. A focus of these educational series were regarding social media. Over 13 sessions in this topic were conducted, which included a discussion of the harms and benefits of social media and the best practices parents should adopt to protect their children from the dangers of internet use. Additional topics included timely marriage and marriage within Jamaat, seeking halal earning, mental health and drugs, and a variety of other topics pertinent to youth and parents. These educational sessions hold the purpose of not only ensuring that parents are educating and raising their children within the principles and traditions of Islam Ahmadiyya, but also for them to gain insight into the unique circumstances youth are experiencing in this country and to better bridge the gap in communication and culture between the 2 generations. During the coronavirus pandemic, Majlis Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya Canada's Department of Tabligh leveraged the impact of social media to propagate the message of Islam and Ahmadiyyat. In particular, through the use of the platform Twitter, various trending campaigns where predetermined hashtag phrases were made to trend globally through synergized and well-coordinated campaigns. Over 1,000 Khuddam participated in tweeting phrases such as hashtag Ahmadiyyat, hashtag True Islam, and hashtag Caliph of Messiah, and were successful in trending these phrases and obtaining over 5 million unique impressions across the world.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Abid sahab, we can go live.
Jazakallah. I would request Zubair Afzal Sahib, Sadr Sahib, my apologies, Iftikhar Ahmed Sahib to conduct the prize distribution ceremony.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. We'll begin with the tilawat competitions. First place from Majlis Mukami, Fatin Riyaz Saab. Second place, Safir Ahmed Saab, also from Majlis Mukami. And third place, Sajid Muslim Saab from Brampton East. Next, we have Nazm competition. First place, Farooq Tahir Saab from Majlis Mukami. Second, Samir Ahmed Saab from Saskatoon South. And third, Atal Kareem Saab from Majlis Mukami. We move on to the Azan competitions. First place, Safir Ahmed Saab, Majlis Mukami. Second, Fatin Riyaz Saab, Majlis Mukami. And third, also from Majlis Mukami, Farooq Tahir Saab. On to the English speech competitions. Tariq Mahmood Saab from Majlis Mukami. Tahir Mia Saab from Majlis Mukami. And third place, Edmonton West, Rian Mia Saab. On to the Urdu speech competitions. First place, Tahir Ahmed Saab from Majlis Moulton. Faraz Chaudhry Saab from Majlis Mukami. Third place, there was a tie. Rahiq Ahmed Saab from Mountain Ash, Eastern Brampton. And Salahuddin Chatta Saab from Martindale, Calgary. For French speech, also a tie for first place, Sajid Muslim Saab from Eastern Brampton and Rizwan Ahmed Khan Saab from Eastern Canada. In second, Imran Shado Saab from Eastern Canada and Khubaib Chaudhry Saab third from Majlis Mukami. In the Bathbazi competition just held this morning, Fatin Riyaz Saab from Majlis Mukami took first, Safir Ahmed Saab second from Mukami, and Sajid Muslim Saab from Brampton East took third place. The essay writing competition organized by MASQ, Khubaib Ahmed Saab took first place from Majlis Maple, Faraz Chaudhry Saab, Majlis Kleinberg, and Bisharat Ahmed Saab from Bradford took third place. The summer series, organized by the Department of Student Affairs and Umur Talaba, is a nationwide quiz-based competition that was run for 10 weeks during the summer. Approximately 200 students from high schools, universities, and colleges throughout the country took part. First place went to Shubaib Khalid Sial Saab from York University. Second place, Sahil Bajwa Saab from Maple High School. Third place, Tahir Mazhar Saab from York University. Fourth place, Jalis Ahmed Saab from Maple High School. And fifth place, Tahmeed Chaudhry Saab from York University. Jazakallah, Smizah. This ends the
Jazakallah for that, and Mubarak ho to all of the people who have attained prizes, and congratulations to everybody who participated. And I would now request respected Sadr Sahib to give us the report of this virtual rally.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah Ta'ala, we have now arrived at the closing session of our National Talimi Rally 2020. And the theme of this year's rally was developing a living relationship with Allah the Almighty. With humble efforts, Khuddam have dedicated many hours working tirelessly over the past few weeks and especially the past 2 days. There was a large number of volunteers from across Canada who participated in various aspects of the organization of this virtual rally, as well as the 20 respected missionaries who helped as judges and conducted the various educational competitions. By the grace of Allah Ta'ala, this was a unique event as it was the first time Majlis Khuddam Al-Ahmadiyya Canada conducted a national virtual Talimi rally. The event was entirely virtual and enabled participants from all across Canada to take part from British Columbia to Atlantic Canada, coast to coast. The National Virtual Talimi Rally commenced on Saturday, yesterday, October the 10th at 1 p.m. with the opening session, which was chaired by Sadr Majlis Sudam Al-Ahmadiyya on the topic of establishing a living relationship with Allah Ta'ala. The highlight of day one of the virtual rally was a question and answer session with respected Amir Sahib Jamaat Ahmadiyya Canada and respected Missionary in Charge Sahib. During this engaging and informative session, Khuddam from across Canada got the opportunity to ask many questions pertaining to religion, social issues, economics, world affairs, and the system of Jamaat. By the grace of Allah Ta'ala, 4 workshops were streamed on the topics of finding employment during the coronavirus pandemic, timely marriage and the system of Rishta Nata, mental health, and keeping fit during the pandemic. Similarly, being a virtual event, there were various new video panel discussions hosted by National Masjid Amla and included members of National Masjid Amla, local and regional Qaideen, and the topics included experiences of Khuddam Al-Ahmadiyya during the past year. Other notable elements of this year's Talimi Rally were the Mushaira, which was conducted in both English and Urdu, and the Bathbazi competition. By the grace of Allah Ta'ala, with the humble efforts of the publicity team, and especially regional Qaideen and local Qaideen, by end of day one, the virtual rally had been viewed by over 4,000 unique viewers. We are thankful to all the local and regional Qaideen for their dedicated and humble efforts to engage Khuddam. In closing session of the National Talimi Rally is chaired by respected Abid Khan Sahib, who's serving as International Press Secretary. And we are very humbled and very grateful to respected Abid Khan Sahib for taking the time out of his busy schedule to join us today. We pray that may Allah Ta'ala enable this virtual rally to be a source of blessing and lasting reformation for all Khuddam. Ameen.
Jazakallah Sadr Sahib. Is there anything else, or would you like me to start?
That concludes the report, and we can proceed to the next program.
Jazakallah Sadr Sahib. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected Sadr Sahib and my respected brothers, Khuddam Al-Ahmadiyya Canada, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Before I proceed with the notes that I wish to, or the points that I wish to share with all of you today, I just want to first of all congratulate you on holding this national event. And from the report given by Sadr Sahib, it seems the participation has been excellent. And I think that this whole COVID period has without question opened up new avenues for our Jamaat members to engage with one another and for our Jamaat programs to be held. And some people who perhaps did not attend in the past when the events were held physically might have been willing to take part in these events, which is good and is of benefit. But also I would just like to mention one point which was raised in a Amla meeting that was held with Hazrat Khalifatul Masih a few weeks ago. And one of the Amla members who was meeting Hazur that day, it was a Lajna, she said that they were actually getting better attendance on these virtual meetings than they were previously. And there's some people that would not attend normally were attending these. And so would it be possible, even when things go back to normal, for some people to join meetings online whilst others attended in person? I guess the best way to describe it is a hybrid ijtima or hybrid meetings. And upon this, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih was very clear. He said that where people have majburi, where they have no other option, perhaps they live so far away or they are in ill health, then for those people, once things get back to normal, it will be permissible, but it would not be a blanket rule. And the true spirit of these istimās and these events, of course, they reach their peak when people gather together in our masjids and they offer their prayers together and all of these things. So I think we've all learned a lot during this period. And there are many lessons that we should take on board for even when, inshallah, things return to normal. But certainly none of us should rest easy that we can just attend from our homes in future and the spirit of sacrifice, God forbid, decrease in any way. Anyway, Jazakallah, it's very kind of you to invite me today. And Canada is a country that I have a special personal affinity to because I've had the chance to travel with Hazur on several occasions to Canada. And certainly the 2016 tour, where Hazur was in Canada for 6 weeks, is very, very high up in my memories of my various Kafla experiences. It was such a wonderful tour. And I cannot, especially perhaps even more in this COVID period, help but reflect and remember some of those moments where Hazur would walk from his residence to his office or to namaz, and there would be so many people, perhaps thousands of people lined up. Some of them would wait for hours in the freezing cold, in the dark, just waiting for that glimpse to see Hazur. And Hazur would wave and be so pleased to see everybody and see that spirit. It was truly, some of the moments were electric, I guess the terminology would be. And I remember that last night in Peace Village, where Hazur had retired to his residence for the evening after the conclusion of the events. And the people and the spirit of the local Ahmadis was so much that they couldn't bear the fact that Hazur would be leaving the next morning. And so they gathered outside his residence and they started to raise nare, and they started to offer nazams and stuff, all in the hope somehow of seeing their beloved master and beckoning him out again. And I wrote this in my diary back then, but I remember that just it was perhaps 10:30 or 11:15 at night, and the crowds were getting bigger and bigger. And I met Hazur within the residence at that point late at night. And myself and Muhammad Ahmed Sahib mentioned to Hazur that there are so many people gathered outside and they're waiting to see Hazur. And at that time, it did not seem that Hazur was aware necessarily, and it did not seem that he had any program to come outside. But, and I remember me and Ahmed Sahib were wondering that are the MDs going to stay outside all night? And then, but obviously when Hazur realized and recognized, and he heard that call of love, his love for the Jamaat was such that he came out and he saw all of the MDs there. And I'll never ever forget that loud nara when people first saw Hazur's face and saw Hazur open the door, and then that walk through Peace Village. These are extremely beautiful memories that I'm sure for all the people who were there, including myself, will linger in our hearts and minds for the rest of our lives. And it's only Khalafat. It's only the presence of Khalifa Waqt, the most pure and spiritual person, the true representative of the promised Messiah, that can elicit those feelings. And it's a love that is completely colorblind. It is not linked to any single race, and that's something that I'm a witness of as a bystander, that wherever in the world Hazur is gone, wherever in the world there are MDs, that spirit, that bond, that love is just the same. And anyway, I think I would like to share a few incidents with you which reflect that bond of love and which also show the love and guidance of Khalifatul Masih, the wisdom of Khalifatul Masih, with the hope that all of you will understand a little better the great blessing that Allah Ta'ala has bestowed upon us. One thing I've always seen wherever I have gone is that Hazur has a special bond of love with the youth and with Khudam al-Ahmadiyya as well. If Hazur goes on any trips, excursions, or Jamaat tours, invariably one of the first questions wherever we stop is, have the Khudam who are on duty, have they eaten well? Have they had time to rest? And one example of Hazur's love and that I remember is from Australia in 2013. That was quite a long visit as well. We were in Australia for a month, and there were a series of domestic flights that Hazur took to go from city to city. And one of the flights was from Sydney to Melbourne. And we arrived at the airport, and there was a khadim who had been assigned duty at the airport to guide Hazur's cars and the kafla cars. And he was stood by a barrier, one of those barriers that rise up whenever there is a car that can pass. And the first two cars of the kafla, they passed through without problem. And then when Hazur's car approached, for whatever reason, the khadim who was on duty called over Hazur's driver as in to proceed, but there was some miscommunication, and the barrier came down and actually hit Hazur's car quite severely. And I remember I was in the car just behind Hazur's, and it was a moment of genuine panic that this barrier has come down and has hit Hazur's car quite strongly. Is Hazur okay? Is Hazrat Appajan okay? And so I and several other people rushed out of our vehicles. And by then the barrier had raised up and Hazur's car had moved forward. And within a few seconds, we were extremely relieved to see that Hazur and Hazrat Appajan both came out of their cars and were fine, alhamdulillah. Hazur inspected the car, but Hazur was a picture of calm. There was a very, I'd say, worried, concerned, anxious whole atmosphere at that time. But Hazur was the picture of calm. And then with that, Hazur, after inspecting it, proceeded to the terminal, and the rest of the journey was conducted without any problem. After a few days, Hazur returned to Sydney, and then the rest of the tour continued. And one day, I met a khadim who was a senior member of the Khudam administration. And I hadn't seen him around for some days. And so I went and just started chatting with him. And then I hadn't realized at the time who was the khadim on duty, or I didn't remember, but he told me at that time, he said that I was the person who was on duty at the barrier that day. And that moment will live with me forever. The shame I felt, the horror I felt. And for that reason, for the past 2 weeks, I've given myself a duty much further away. Normally, because he was senior in the administration, he was around the kafla, around Hazur. But for that period of 10, 11 days, he couldn't bear himself out of his sadness and his shame. But he told me, he said that morning, when he had come back to his duty and his post, near where Hazur was, his office and his residence, he said, I was completely stunned. He said that as Hazur walked out, he saw me straight away. And he said, where have you been the last 10, 11 days? I haven't seen you for some time. And he said, the look of love and kindness and grace on Hazur's face, he filled me with such emotion that rather than have any hint of anger or any hint of disappointment, Hazur knew my heart, and Hazur recognized it, and Hazur very beautifully asked me that, where have you been? One of the more recent tours, or I think the most recent tour, was last year when Hazur visited Europe. Hazur visited Holland, France, and Germany. And during that tour, Hazur delivered several addresses. I think in the whole tour, I counted 19 addresses of different to different audiences, but there was 2 addresses to guests which really stood out for me. One was delivered at UNESCO in Paris at the headquarters, and one was delivered in Berlin. And I think it's very important for the Qudam to be aware of these two addresses. There's aware for all MDs, but especially I think Qudam. The address in UNESCO was, obviously it's a center of learning. And so there Hazur spoke with a lot of pride about the achievements of the Muslim scholars in the Middle Ages, the inventors, the pioneers, how they had made vast contributions to science, to literature, to mathematics, and so many other fields. And then Hazur spoke about how in this era, it was an Ahmadi, Professor Abdul Salam Sahib, who had reached the pinnacle of science. And Hazur then also spoke about the way in the time of the Holy Prophet, such a magnificent example of a society was set up in Medina. And so it was an extremely comprehensive speech. And when Hazur returned to the UK, he delivered another address at the Amra conference, where Hazur further took up this subject. And Hazur spoke about the achievements of those early scientists, but Hazur also spoke about his regret that when Professor Abdul Salam Sahib won the Nobel Prize, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis had spoken and expressed his desire that that would launch a new era in which MDs would take up that mantle of those pioneer scientists and follow in the footsteps of Professor Salam. And Hazur spoke about how, apart from a few handful of cases, in the next 30, 40 years, we had not produced those people of the highest level. And Hazur said it was up to the Qudam, up to our young people today to work and to strive so that another golden era could be formed of Islam, where people in this era ridicule Muslims. They ridicule Islam. They think that we are backward. Hazur has challenged all of us to rise up. And so I think this is something very serious that Qudam should pay attention to. The other address which I allude to is the Berlin Address. And this was also a very historic address because the subject matter was whether Islam was a threat to Western civilization. And this is something that is very commonly expressed by many critics of Islam, that Muslims are here to change the West, that we want to conquer it, that we want to impose our values and remove their values. And so it was a very controversial, I guess you could say, subject matter. But the way Hazur addressed it was truly magnificent. Rather than stay on the defensive, that no, Islam is not here to change your values or anything. Actually, Hazur went on the opposite side and the offensive. Hazur said that it's not Islam that is a threat to your society. It is not Islam that is a threat to your civilization. Rather, it is atheism. It is the fact that you people in these societies are moving away from God Almighty. Those are the reasons that your norms that have existed for centuries, in many cases, are suddenly being overturned in the name of progress. What generations and generations had fought for, you are abandoning without pause for thought. And I think this is again something that all of us should pay attention to, should read that address. I mean, I've only given a few lines of it, but it's a masterpiece of an address, and it gives us the courage, or it should give us the courage, to defend our religion and to speak out. And to, if we have, it's quite possible that given the anti-Islam media that we see, or the amount of stuff on social media, that some of us may even develop complexes about our faith. And so it's essential that we pay heed to what Hazur has said in these addresses. Another thing that I've always learned from is not just Huzur's addresses and his speeches, but also the way he prepares for those addresses. And I would like to share one incident that before this UNESCO address last year, the program was being arranged in conjunction with UNESCO, and one of the persons, the main contact was an African ambassador to UNESCO, who himself was a Muslim. And so he was quite happy initially for the program at UNESCO to start with the Lawat, the way all our programs start. However, a day or two before Huzur's tour was to start, there was our Kharja secretary was informed that he has now suddenly decided that it's not appropriate for the event to start with the Lawat, because UNESCO is a neutral place, I guess, and he didn't want a religious element to the speech or to the function. So the Kharja secretary in France asked me to convey this to Huzur, this update, and I did convey it to him at the earliest opportunity. And it was very clear that Huzur was disappointed. And Huzur said that they should try their best to persuade the host, because he himself is a Muslim, that does not his love for the Holy Quran demand that he should take a stand here for the sake of Islam, for the sake of the Holy Quran? But sadly, unfortunately, he was not willing to make that stand. But it's the next point which I want to really was the lesson for me and the lesson for all of us. That after I'd conveyed this update to Huzur, suddenly Huzur's demeanor and tone became even more serious. And Huzur very, not curtly, but in strong terms, Huzur said, will they try and stop me from reciting Bismillah at the start of my address? And I was really astonished when Huzur said this. It was not something I was expecting at all. And my instant reaction was, Huzur, no, of course, nobody can stop you from reciting Bismillah and starting with the Lawat in this way of your address, whether the function starts with it or not. And upon this, Huzur, again, very, very seriously, he said, if when I reach the podium and I begin to start my address, if anybody tries to stop me from reciting Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, I will walk out of that hall at that very moment and I will not deliver my address. And then Huzur continued, and he said that perhaps you or the other people might feel embarrassed, but I will leave that hall without a second glance. And I remember when Huzur said this, the way Huzur was speaking and the words he was speaking were so powerful that I honestly felt like I was shuddering. And I said, somehow I said to Huzur that, Huzur, if that transpires, inshallah, we will not feel even an iota of embarrassment. We will feel only pride. And we will walk out right behind you. But of course, alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah, it did not transpire in that way, and the event proved to be a great success. But again, the point is that no matter what, there are certain values, there are certain ideals of our faith that must always take priority and that we must never have complex in. Other people, most people, if they went to such a grand stage, an event that has been months in the, probably years in the planning, if there was some pressure or something, they would probably just come under it. Most of us probably would as well, and just continue. But Huzur made it very clear that there are certain things where you have to take a stand for the sake of your faith, no matter what the embarrassment, no matter what the consequences. I mentioned how the way Huzur prepares for his addresses, for his speeches, is also something from which we can learn. I've seen Hazur prepare for many of these addresses where I'm lucky and fortunate to be able to take dictation for. And sometimes Hazur will dictate without stopping for many minutes. But there are other times where Hazur will stop. He will take time to read and study the Holy Quran, study the commentaries, study the books of the promised Messiah. Where relevant, he will study and read the external statements of politicians or the media or columnists. And again, they have been a lesson for me, certainly, that when you are representing Islam, you must do your utmost to try and make sure that you prepare in a way that you can present it in the very best way. Those mulaqatein, for me personally, are always a great joy. And most of the time is spent in the work where Hazur is either giving dictation or studying his notes. But occasionally, Hazur will also lighten the mood, or he will look up from his work and he will ask how my family is, or just ask me if there's anything else. And I remember during these sessions, sometimes the sessions of dictation would last for 2 or 3 hours at a time. Once Hazur asked me that, how are your children? And I mentioned to Hazur a conversation that I'd had with my son that day. My son at the time was 5 or 6. And he had been looking at a watch that Hazur had graciously gifted me a year or 2 before. And he was looking at it very admiringly. And then suddenly, my young son, he said that, when you die, can I have this watch? And it wasn't a question I had been expecting at all. But when I told this comment to Hazur, Hazur laughed, and he really, really enjoyed it, and the innocence of a child. And my son's name is Mahid, and Hazur said that in your household, Mahid is the one who makes the most bold comments. Anyway, with that, I was glad that Hazur had this one moment of respite where he'd enjoyed the light comment. And then Hazur turned his chair around and started going through his cupboards. And I assumed that he was looking for some notes or a book. And Hazur continued for 2 or 3 minutes looking in his cupboard. After 2 or 3 minutes, or however long it was, Hazur turned around, and in his hand was a box, and it had a beautiful watch inside it. And Hazur said, "Give this to Mahid, so that he doesn't have to wait until you pass away." And it was such a beautiful and touching moment for me. And the way Hazur expressed the love for a child, and I mean, that was clear to me, but also it was an example of how Hazur cares for those people who are serving the Jamaat. And so I think this, again, is a lesson for all of us as well, that we, in our duties and stuff, we all have team members or people who we are working with. And we should always try and treat them in that same loving way, that compassionate way. None of us can reach the standards of Khalifa Waqt. His heart is so open and generous, but we should all try our utmost to do so. Of course, we are now living in this very difficult period, 6, 7, 8 months of the lockdowns, of coronavirus. Everyone's talking about a new normal. I remember the new normal, my own routine changed a lot in March, because for many years I had been reporting daily to Hazur every single day. And my whole routine was shaped around that daily mulaqat. But when the lockdown came in UK, Hazur instructed me to reduce my visits to Islamabad somewhat, and instead Hazur said to me, "Baki phone par rabta." And I didn't really understand what Hazur meant by that. And I felt very sad that I wouldn't be reporting every single day anymore to Islamabad for the foreseeable future. So, but obviously our job is obedience. Hazur did not desire for us to do anything that contravened the law of the land, and the strictness of the laws here at the time were extreme. After a couple of days, I was in my home, and I think we were probably getting ready for our evening meal, if I remember correctly, and suddenly I got a call from Private Secretary's office that Hazur wishes to speak to you. And I remember I dropped everything, ran to try and find a quiet space in my home, and with great nerves and shaking, I received that call of Khalifatul Masih. I'd spoken to Hazur a few times, perhaps 3 or 4 or 5 times before on the phone, and each time the nerves were extreme, much more than when I even see Hazur in person. And that day I had prepared a diary of some events which I'd submitted to Hazur the day before. So Hazur told me that he had already been through it, but there were some corrections that were needed. And over the phone, Hazur told me the corrections. And then with that, the phone call ended. The next day at a similar time, to my astonishment, I got another call from Private Secretary Sahib that Hazur wishes to speak to you. And then the call came through, and Hazur started asking me about the day's events, the media, the type of things I would normally, but I hadn't prepared at all because I wasn't expecting the call. And so I just tried my best to work off memory. But Hazur could tell that I wasn't properly prepared. So at the end of the call, he said that you should prepare every day, just like you would in normal circumstances. And that's when I realized what Hazur had meant in his office, that Baki phone par rabta, that the communication will continue. And I was really, really quite stunned that the way Hazur is keeping this contact, his love, his generosity, and the opportunity to serve him. And then over the next few months, the vast majority of my mulaqats were and continue even now to be done in this fashion. After a few weeks of lockdown, when it became clear that these restrictions were not going to be short-term, but would continue in some vein or another for some time, then we saw how Hazur's activities, his engagements, continue to evolve and adapt to the circumstances. So now, at this time, or for the several few months, daftari mulaqatein, a lot of them have been conducted in the same way that my mulaqats often are, through the phone. And then since August, we have seen the introduction of the virtual mulaqats. And mashallah, Canada was at the forefront of this. And you were very, of course, your Jamaat, very lucky that the first 2 meetings were with Canada delegations. And this has been a really beautiful way in which the bond of Khilafat and the ability of people to meet with Hazur has expanded so much. Just yesterday, there was 60 plus atfal from Australia, 10,000 miles away, but communicating with Hazur as though they were seated right in front of him in his office, and Hazur was communicating with them as though they were seated right before him. There are some moments of this lockdown that I think have brought about events that we wouldn't expect, some personal, some in terms of Hazur's activities. I remember in the early days of the lockdown, one of the Khudam who remained on site at Islamabad doing security duty, he called me one day and he was very upset. He was quite emotional. And so I asked him, what is the matter? And he said that today it was raining very hard and very heavily in Islamabad. And I felt very sad that when Hazur was going to and from namaz, there was no security guard or no Khudam who was holding Hazur's umbrella because of the social distancing rules. And instead, Hazur was holding had to pick his own umbrella up, and Hazur would walk to the mosque with it himself in the same way that there was nobody no khadim on duty to present Huzur with the shoe horn at the end of namaz. And anyway, when I next had mulaqat, I mentioned these comments of this khadim to Huzur. And Huzur started, I could tell on the phone that Huzur was smiling. And Huzur just said, "Ke main to aajkal azad hua hu," laughing. And that these days I am free. And it was a good reminder, actually, that these type of things, that if the security guards hold Huzur's umbrella, or a khadim has the opportunity to present Huzur with a shoe horn, these are not done because Khalifa Waqt desires or, God forbid, demands these things. Rather, it is our desire to be close to him and to seek these blessings that Huzur permits them. But in those days, because of circumstances, it was just not possible. And that it was actually, as Huzur said, a means of freedom. After 17 years, perhaps he was able to walk without a crowd of people jumping around him or gathering around him. Perhaps he was able to hold his umbrella. And these are very, very small, minute details that every single one of us takes for granted in our lives. But again, we should always remember the sacrifices to his personal life and his family life that Khalifa Waqt is making for the sake of us, for the sake of our Jamaat, for the sake of our tarbiyat. These days, of course, the American presidential election is very close, and it's of interest, the result, to a lot of people. You in Canada are the neighbors, and so you are much closer to President Trump and his administration than us here in the United Kingdom. But last time, I'm sure you will all remember how in the weeks before the election in America, and even on the day of the election, Huzur was in Canada. And I'm sure everybody or many of you will have seen that excerpt from the Peter Mansbridge interview, where Huzur was asked about the possibility of President Trump being elected and what would happen if he did not fulfill the rights of his people equally. And that moment where Huzur said that if a president comes and does not fulfill the rights of his people and stokes flames of division and injustice, then I fear that there could be a civil war. And I recall the shock and surprise, not only on the face of Peter Mansbridge, which is very clear to anybody who sees it, and the way he repeats it to confirm what Huzur has said, but all of us who were present at that time, the sense of surprise at Huzur's choice of words was palpable. Some MDs who were there and some who watched it on MTA or on the TV later asked me that, did Huzur misspeak? Because at that time, just 4 years ago, such a scenario in the United States seemed completely impossible, beyond the wildest dreams. And but in the last 3-4 years, sadly, that division, examples of injustice have been witnessed in the United States, which has meant that society has become increasingly polarized. A lot of division, whether on racial lines or religious lines, immigration, all these issues everybody knows, to the point that now the concept and discussion of civil war is openly discussed. I've read many newspaper columns. I've read last year, I remember even the president himself retweeted somebody who spoke about the possibility of civil war in the United States. In the last few weeks, several articles have been written. And I remember when when the president of the United States retweeted or tweeted that comment of somebody about civil war, at that point, I informed Huzur about this. And I was really, really struck by Hazur's response to me. Hazur reflected on that interview, and Hazur said that I do not, and these are Hazur's words, I do not know why the words civil war came out of my mouth when I was interviewed by Peter Mansbridge in Canada. Certainly it was not something I had thought of before, but at that moment, somehow Allah placed those words in my mind for me to say in front of the entire world. Allah knows better why He put this term in my mind, but now, 3 years later, even the President of the United States is raising this possibility. And I remember I found it very enlightening and faith-inspiring, how this was an example of something that Hazur had not planned to say this. It was not something that he had thought about prior to that interview. But there at that moment, Allah Ta'ala put it in his heart, guided his tongue to say something. And with time, those words of Hazur have become apparent, the wisdom behind them, the truth of them, to all peoples. And there is a great lesson in that for all Jamaat members, that we should never ever query or question something that is instructed or stated by the Khalifa-e-Waqt. Our job, our duty is to say we have listened and we obey, even if we don't understand the rationale or the reasoning. Our faith demands, decrees that Allah Ta'ala is guiding the Khalifa-e-Waqt. We've had an example of this recently as well. A few months ago, the Black Lives Matter movement reached a peak after the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And at that time, there was very, very strong sentiments in USA amongst many Ahmadis that we must, as a Jamaat, endorse this movement. But, and I've said this in the recent documentary that aired on MTA, so I'm not going to go into detail, but Hazur very specifically stated that our terms, our slogans, our campaigns, they are not going to be motivated by worldly communities, worldly organizations, what the latest trend is. Rather, our slogans, our campaigns, our efforts are motivated, are inspired by the teachings of the Holy Quran, by the teachings of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And that's why Hazur gave those terms, supremacy of justice and innocent lives matter. And already, there are many, many people who were 100% supportive of Black Lives Matter just a few months ago, who now are querying some of its objectives. You can see division started to break in those ranks. If that's happened in a few months, you can imagine what would happen in 3, 4 years, 5 years. Probably it'll be a completely new slogan. But ours are guided by the timeless teachings of the Holy Quran, of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And that is the difference between a worldly community and a divine community. And again, this is something for all of us to bear in mind, that do we want to be the people who follow whatever the world is saying and have a very easy life, a comfortable life where everybody is agreeing with us in that moment, but which does not lead to great success, which ultimately leads to failure, and then moving on to the next thing, whatever the next hot topic is? Or do we want to take the longer path, but the path which Allah Ta'ala has decreed for us? That is what Khalifa-e-Waqt is guiding us. And we are so, so fortunate to have that blessed guidance, to have that inspiration. I've taken up a lot of time. I'm going to wrap up in a minute or two. But sometimes you also get some very enjoyable moments, light moments in the presence of Khalifatul Masih. And these invariably are also a result of the love that Ahmadis have for their Khalifa, that sometimes people become nervous. I remember I was speaking to somebody in Holland last year, and his close friend had recently emigrated from Pakistan. And he had the opportunity to have mulaqat with Hazur for the first time in his life. And he was so excited. He took his family and he was ready, and he went into the mulaqat and he told Hazur asked him that in Pakistan, where did you work? And he said, Hazur, in Pakistan, I worked in WAPTA, the Water and Power Development Agency. So upon this, he's told me that Hazur said to him that if you worked in that organization, then you must have taken bribes as a joke. Zarur rishwat liya hoga. And he said that without thinking, with great enthusiasm, he said, Ji Hazur. And he said that the mulaqat continued. And he said that Hazur just had a smile on his face, but did not say anything. And he said 2 or 3 more minutes of the mulaqat. And then he said, it clicked in my mind that what Hazur had asked me and what I had said. And he said that suddenly, even though the topic had changed, he said, I suddenly interjected and said, Hazur, I did not take any bribes. And Hazur started laughing and enjoyed that moment very much. And then similarly, there was another person I met in Holland, and he told me his own waqia, his own incident. He said that there was a delegation that went from Holland of Khudam to see Hazur last year. It was National Amla, and he was one of the Amla members. And he said that we all seated before Hazur, and during the middle of the meeting, suddenly Hazur asked that, is there any Amla member who has more than one wife? And he said that without thinking and without any hesitation, I raised my hand up straight away. And he said that all the other Amla members suddenly started looking at me in confusion, thinking that he only has one wife that we know of. And anyway, the meeting ended. And then he said that the other Amla members came to him and said that Hazur asked if anyone had more than one wife, and you raised your hand. And he said he was completely stunned. He said that I don't know what I heard or what I misheard, but just in that excitement, I could not help but raise my hand. And so I think when he got home, he was saying he had some explaining to do to his wife because he feared that it would be shown on MTA. But I think we cut that clip out. But anyway, I'm going to end that one piece of advice, one beautiful instruction that Hazur gave me a few months ago when the lockdown was still in its peak stage and Eid was approaching. And that was a tough period for all Ahmadi Muslims. In those days, we all know that Hazur injured himself, which was extremely painful. And Alhamdulillah, Hazur recovered very quickly and very well with Allah's grace. But it was also that period of Eid where instead of offering prayers behind Hazur as would be our routine, instead of seeing Hazur on Eid day, most of us were offering Eid prayers just in our own homes. And I'm sure the situation was probably the same in Canada. So just a day or two before Eid, I remember I was speaking to Hazur and I said, and Hazur, I mentioned that how I was sad that I wouldn't have the chance to offer Eid namaz behind Hazur this year. And I said, Hazur, both ajeeb dunya hogi hai, that the world has become very strange at this time. And in response, I'll never forget Hazur's reply. He said, Phir Allah Ta'ala se chimit jao, yehi hal hai, yehi tarika hai. That if the world has become strange, then attach yourself to Allah the Almighty. This is the only solution. This is the only way. Now, of course, that instruction was given to me in that one particular context, but this is a comment of universal value. It is a reflection of how Hazur himself spends every single moment of his life. And it's a reflection of what he desires from every single Ahmadi, every single Khadim. Personally, I've never met any person who is as calm, who is as strong, as wise as Khalifa Waqt. Hazur truly has nerves of steel. He can tolerate every situation, every circumstance. I have shared myself many good newses with Hazur, many sad newses, upsetting newses. The same is true from MDs across the world. Yet Hazur's response invariably is very calm, whether it is a moment of happiness, whether it is a moment of sadness. And why is that? That is because of his trust in Allah. It is because he has attached himself to Allah the Almighty in the way that he desires for all of us to do. And if all of us truly want inner peace of mind, we're not going to achieve it through material endeavors. We're not going to achieve it by having the most money, the best house, or any of these things. We all know that in our heart of hearts. It is by developing that relationship with Allah Ta'ala, by fulfilling the pledge of our Bai'at and being obedient to our spiritual master. So Jazakallah, Sada Sahib, to all of the organizers who have arranged this event, and to all of the people, the Khuddam, and who have joined us this evening. It's my pleasure to be with you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Jazakumullah. I know that we have come closer to the end of the program, only if we can only extend it. I'm getting messages that if I can request you to prolong this. There's a few questions that have come through. In fact, there's quite a number of them, but many of the questions, it seems as if they have already been answered through your address as well. So if permitted, if I can share maybe 2 or 3 of them towards,
please.
Have a silent prayer after that.
Jazakallah.
One question is that how do you imagine the future mulaqats would look like when hundreds of thousands of Ahmadis who have never had the opportunity to meet Hazur Anwar, Ayyadahullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz, to meet Hazur Anwar or to be near him?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. What I can say is that these virtual mulaqats have certainly opened a new avenue for many, many people who were unable in the past to meet Hazur or to meet Khalifa Waqt because of their own circumstances, their resources. They all now have some hope that one day they will be the fortunate ones that will have this blessed opportunity to meet with Hazur Anwar. Certainly, when the first meeting happened with the Canadian group, and it was, mashallah, a successful event, in my heart, I thought of the MDs of Pakistan who have been deprived of the presence of physical presence of Khalifa Waqt for 36 years, that perhaps, hopefully now, the opportunity may arise to them moving forward. There are many other MDs in other parts of the world as well who are distant. So this is certainly one avenue. As for when, inshallah, the days come when there will be hundreds of thousands of people at our events and stuff, then obviously there will be ways where the people can see the Khalifa Waqt, the numbers of Zati personal mulaqats may have to be cut down, or maybe group mulaqats. In Germany already, sometimes they have these group mulaqats where 700-800 people will come in the mosque, and they will come one by one and meet Hazur and have 30-40 seconds and then move on to the next person. And I've seen that in Africa as well. So perhaps those will be ways as well in the future of how the time can be maximize. But I would also say that I've always seen that the time of Khalifa Waqt is extremely blessed by Allah the Almighty. And the work and efficiency that Hazur is able to achieve is far, far beyond what an average person can do in his time. And so even if he only has the same 24 hours as the rest of us, Hazur's 24 hours are especially blessed by Allah the Almighty. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah. Next question that we have is, we live in Canada and Khuddam living in the UK are so fortunate they're so closer to Huzur Anwar. So how can we get closer? Normally we have many trips from Canada to UK, but due to pandemic, we don't have those. So what can we do as Khuddam from Canada to be closer to Khilafat?
I mean, I think there are, of course, there are various ways that even not just in the pandemic, but in normal circumstances, whether you live close or far, it is not just about meeting Hazur to build up that spiritual connection, physically meeting him, but it is to be spiritually close to him. And the means of that spiritual attachment, Hazur has told us himself on many occasions, is by being obedient to Khilafat. Every week he is meeting us through his Friday sermons. But how many of us can say that we truly are acting upon all of Hazur's instructions that he's giving in the sermons? How many of us are fulfilling his desires for us to spend as much time as possible in the worship of Allah the Almighty? So we need to build up ourselves, and there's so many instructions of Khalifa Waqt, and that will naturally increase the love in our hearts for Khilafat. In addition, I mean, when I grew up in the time of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi, I lived 300 miles from London. And so it was not possible for me to see Khalifa Rabi every weekend or every week or just a few times a year. And I used to write regularly. I'm sure Sadr Sahib and the Amla members are already advising the Khuddam to write to Hazur as much as possible and to build up that personal connection. And I've seen on many occasions when Hazur has traveled to a country or when MDs have traveled to meet him and they introduce themselves and they mention their names, Hazur will say, I know you because I've read your letters. You write to me, you had this issue, you had that issue. So I would say, first and foremost, be obedient as much as possible. Listen to Hazur's programs and reflect upon how much you are following his instructions. And then, of course, if you can't physically meet him, then try and strive to write to him as often as you can.
Jazakumullah, we'll have one last question, and I think you highlighted this, so you spoke about this briefly. The question is that do you remember vividly any memories of Huzur Anwar Ayyadahullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz from his last trip to Canada? How did he feel about the atmosphere of Peace Village when he visited?
Yes, there are many, many memories of that trip on a personal level, at a Jamaati level, that will stay in my mind for a long time. It really was a beautiful, and it seemed for some time as though Canada has now become our home, actually. I was wondering if we were ever going to go back, but Hazur really greatly enjoyed that atmosphere, and it's something that I've heard Hazur speak about, of the Peace Village atmosphere, of when he would go to the mosque or go and the MDs would be there. And in my personal mulaqats with Hazur, he has mentioned it on a few occasions ever since. In terms of something that stands out, I've already mentioned that evening when Hazur walked amongst everyone, but also I remember that day in Ottawa where Hazur was meeting the Prime Minister of Canada. He was meeting so many dignitaries from morning to evening. He had a packed schedule. And I remember that the MP who was hosting Hazur Judy Seguro, she at one point apologized to Hazur. And she said that, Hazur, Your Holiness, I apologize that we've made your schedule so packed that from morning to evening you have meetings, but we wanted to avail your day in this parliament area, and so that as many MPs could meet you as possible. And I'll never forget Hazur's answer, because Hazur said that there is no need for you to apologize. In terms of hours, today is not a long day for me at all. My normal days are even longer than this. But in one respect, it is long for me. And that is because today I'm not with my MDs, I'm not with my people, and I'm missing them. And I remember it was such a beautiful answer. Again, Hazur was in one of the most prestigious parliaments of the world, holding meetings with one of the world's most famous leaders. And all the while, rather than feeling pride in that most worldly people would feel, Khalifa Waqt was missing the masjid, and he was missing the average MDs who he would see, who would wave to him. And I think that answer in itself shows his love for the members of your Jamaat.
Jazakumullah. At the end, on behalf of all of Majlis Al Ahmadiyya Canada, I really want to thank respected Abid Khan Sahib from the bottom of our hearts for graciously joining us today. And I cannot state how honored we are and just how faith inspiring this session with you has been. We are very grateful for you to have joined us. And I can say that just in a brief session, we have all learned a tremendous amount of the importance of Khilafat, of the blessings of Khilafat, and how to create a strong bond with Khilafat. May Allah enable us to take lasting benefit from this. Jazakumullah ta'ala asna. If I can request you kindly to lead us in a silent prayer so we may conclude this virtual rally.
Jazakallah, Sadr Sahib, Jazakallah once again. Please all join me in silent prayer. Ameen.
Ameen. Jazakumullah.